quite conversational, and that wasn't sort of like saying, "Oh my God, you're never gonna." It was just so. I find him to be.
What's the secret about Steven Spielberg? He eats babies. Whole babies.
Diddy's trial is dragging big names into the spotlight, and now Julia Roberts just dropped a shocking bomb. Steven Spielberg might be next.
Names are going to come out. Sean will talk. That's why Jay-Z is running. That's why Jay-Z is nervous.
According to her, he's not as clean as Hollywood wants us to believe. If he's tied to Diddy, we could be looking at buried secrets and serious crimes.
I find him to be, unfortunately, not as good at remembering the time that we spent together as.
So what did Julia uncover? And is one of the most iconic filmmakers of our time hiding a sinister truth? Let's get into it. Word is, Julia shared some major info that could get a famous director in serious trouble. Remember back in January when that court case in Manhattan revealed a list of names tied to Jeffrey Epstein?
Newly released court documents relating to the Jeffrey Epstein. They include associates, friends, and alleged victims of the disgraced billionaire who died in jail 5 years ago.
Let's just say that list had some big names on it. And now that Diddy's behind bars, it looks like Spielberg might be facing some heat too. And if you know Julia Roberts, you know she doesn't shy away from the spotlight. Her latest comments have people asking just how deep this whole thing really goes. There's been a lot of talk online about Spielberg possibly being connected to Epstein's scandals. Some fans were shocked, while others weren't surprised at all, saying nobody's truly untouchable. The buzz died down for a bit, but now Julia's brought it right back. She spilled some major tea that fans have been waiting for, and let's just say it's turning heads. So, what exactly did Julia say about Spielberg, and how does it tie into their long-running feud?
I know more about, him and his life and Amy Irving and what have you than I probably said about my own life.
Julia Roberts and Steven Spielberg are basically the face of a classic Hollywood feud. Their tension dates all the way back to the filming of Hook in the late 80s. Spielberg didn't hold back. He publicly called Julia tough to work with, saying she had a bad attitude and didn't always take direction well. But the drama wasn't just about what happened on set. Behind the scenes, Julia was dealing with some serious personal issues. She was engaged to her Hook co-star Kiefer Sutherland, and they were supposed to get married the day after filming wrapped. But everything fell apart when Julia found out he was cheating. She called off the wedding at the last minute, adding even more chaos to an already tense situation.
She wanted to do in the end. And I think it took a lot of courage, in amongst all of that other stuff, to be able to say, I can't do this.
Spielberg could totally tell that Julia's messy relationship with Kiefer was affecting her vibe on set, and he didn't hold back in an interview with 60 Minutes. He straight up said, "It was not a great time for Julia and I to be working together." That comment really hit Julia hard. She had confided in him on set and was genuinely trying to keep things professional, so hearing him say that felt like a major betrayal. In a Vanity Fair interview, she clapped back, saying she was shocked that he didn't have her back when people started calling her difficult to work with. "I saw that, and my eyes popped out of my head. I couldn't believe someone I trusted would actually hesitate to defend me," she said, even calling him a turncoat. Later on, in another interview, she threw a bit more shade, saying Spielberg had a pretty foggy and unreliable memory of what really went down on that set in the late 80s.
I find quite confused in his recollection.
With all the drama already simmering between these two Hollywood heavyweights, it was only a matter of time before someone asked Julia Roberts what she thought about Steven Spielberg's name supposedly showing up on the Epstein list. You know how reporters are, always ready to stir the pot, especially when celebrity drama is involved. So when Spielberg's name got mentioned, they went straight to Julia for a reaction, and she didn't hold back. Julia threw some serious shade, hinting that Spielberg might have some dark and creepy interests, ones that go way beyond anything he's ever put in a movie.
I'm not even going to talk about Spielberg. Steven Spielberg is
Some old pre-production notes from Indiana Jones have come back into the spotlight, and they're causing a lot of strong reactions. These notes reveal an early planning conversation between Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, and writer Lawrence Kasdan. In it, they talk about Indiana Jones's backstory, and some of their ideas are pretty disturbing. At one point, George Lucas suggests that Indy had a past with a young girl. He imagines a storyline where Indiana met her when she was about 11, and they later started a romantic relationship. As they discussed the character's age, Lucas mentioned the idea of a strange relationship. Both he and Spielberg talked about making her a little older, thinking 15 might be a good age to keep the story edgy. They even discussed having the girl be the one to start the relationship with Indy. These old notes have upset a lot of fans. People are questioning the kind of choices being made in Hollywood back then, especially around such a well-loved character. The three men went back and forth over the matter, with one suggesting that the girl should rather be the one throwing herself at Jones than the other way around. They even considered bumping up the age to around 15 years, but not further than that, or the story could lose its edge. They explained that 15 was the best age to peg the girl, and that when she last met Indiana Jones, she came on strongly to him, and the two engaged their carnal desires. A lot of fans were totally grossed out when they found out about how messed up Spielberg and his crew were during the early days of Indiana Jones. Like, seriously, who thought it was cool to make a young girl hook up with an older guy just to make the movie edgier? But hey, it's Hollywood, right? That place where all the shady stuff happens, where big shots use young, eager talents to satisfy their creepy cravings. It's messed up. When fans found out about this hair-raising detail from Indiana Jones, their reaction was something like this. Some fans think movies are just stories and don't reflect the personal lives of the people who make them. And that could be true, but let's be honest. Movies often reflect parts of real life. So maybe Spielberg and his team had some strange stuff going on that slipped into their films. Take his focus on young characters and older adults. It didn't just happen once. There are rumors that during the filming of Jurassic Park, Spielberg got really close to Ariana Richards. People say he even sent her caregiver away so they could be alone in her hotel room, supposedly to go over lines. Sources claim he put her in situations that made her uncomfortable and really affected her mentally. That night was just the start of more strange encounters, with Spielberg allegedly taking advantage of her. She's been in therapy for years and won't talk about the movie or give interviews. She seems to have completely cut ties with Hollywood and avoids anything related to Spielberg. After Jurassic Park, she did a few more movies but eventually left the industry. Now she focuses on painting, which may be her way of healing and finding peace through art. Ariana left acting to get away from years of mistreatment by powerful people in the industry, people who really should have known better. One of those figures was Roman Polanski, a Polish director and friend of Spielberg. Now, we're not saying they're the same, but you've heard the saying, birds of a feather flock together. Like Spielberg, Polanski has also faced serious accusations about his behavior with young women. On March 10, 1977, Polanski, who was 43 at the time, was arrested in LA on multiple charges involving Samantha Gailey, now Samantha Geimer, who was only 13. The charges were serious: drug, sodomy, lewd acts with a child under 14, and giving drugs to a minor. At first, he pleaded not guilty, but later he agreed to a plea deal. In exchange for dropping the more serious charges, he pleaded guilty to having unlawful sex.
To paint portraiture, I would say, is my very favorite thing.
After a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation and being put on probation, Roman Polanski ran away from justice in February 1978. He left the U.S. for England, then moved to France, just hours before he was supposed to be sentenced. Since then, he has mostly lived in France and avoids traveling to places where he might be sent back to the U.S. Back on March 10, 1977, Polanski faced 6 serious charges involving the drugging and rape of 13-year-old Samantha Jane Gailey, now Samantha Geimer. These charges included unlawful a minor under 8, perversion, sodomy, lewd acts on a child under 14, and giving minor. In the end, Polanski pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of unlawful sex with a minor. Geimer later told the grand jury that Polanski had asked her mother, who was a TV actress and model, if he could take photos of her for the French edition of Vogue, where he was a guest editor. Her mom said yes to a private photo shoot. Geimer said she felt uncomfortable during the first session because Polanski asked her to pose topless. She was hesitant about doing a second shoot, but agreed. The second photo shoot happened at actor Jack Nicholson's house in Los Angeles. At that time, Nicholson was away on a ski trip in Colorado. His girlfriend Angelica Houston was at the house but left for a while, then came back while Polanski and Geimer were still inside. Geimer remembered Houston getting suspicious about what was going on behind the closed bedroom door and banging on it, but left after Polanski told her they were just finishing the photo shoot. Geimer later said, "We did photos with me drinking champagne. Toward the end, it got a little scary, and I realized he had other intentions. I knew I was not where I should be, but I just didn't quite know how to get myself out of there. In a 2003 interview, she recalled that she began to feel uncomfortable after he asked her to lie down on a bed and described how she attempted to resist. "I said, no, I don't want to go in there. No, I don't want to do this. No. And then I didn't know what else to do," she stated, adding, "We were alone and I didn't know what else would happen if I made a scene. So I was just scared, and after giving some resistance, I figured, well, I guess I'll get to come home after this." Guymer testified that Polanski provided champagne that they shared as well as part of a quaalude, and despite her protests, he performed OS on her and penetrated her both vaginally and anally, each time after being told no and being asked to stop. Describing the event in his autobiography, Polanski stated that he did not drug Guymer, that she wasn't unresponsive, and that she did not respond negatively when he inquired as to whether or not she was enjoying what he was doing. The 28-page probation report submitted to the court by Kenneth Fair, his parole officer, and signed by Deputy Irwin Gold, excused his behavior due to his creative genius and being an immigrant from a land with different morals, placed some of the blame on the victim and her mother, and concluded by saying that there was evidence that the victim was not only physically mature, but willing. The officer's report also quoted two psychiatrists' denial of Polanski being a P or S deviant. Claiming to protect Guymer from going through a trial, her attorney arranged a plea bargain. Polanski accepted, and as part of the agreement, the 5 initial charges were dismissed. Instead, he pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of engaging in unlawful course with a minor. Under the terms of the plea deal, Roman Polanski was initially ordered to report to a state prison in California for a 90-day psychiatric evaluation. However, he was allowed to postpone this to finish filming a project in Europe. While he was in Europe working on the 1979 remake of Hurricane, he was spotted at Oktoberfest in 1977, surrounded by young girls and beer jars.
Then I realized something was wrong. I was frightened. I didn't know what to do. And I just knew then, it was like, oh, this guy, he wants to get his hands on me. Oh my God, what am I gonna do?
Polanski came back to California and started his evaluation at Chino State Prison on December 19, 1977. He was released after only 42 days, even though he was supposed to serve 90. His lawyers thought he would get probation at sentencing, especially since the probation officer, the psychiatrist who examined him, and even the victim all recommended prison time. But on January 20th, 1978, Polanski was fired from his job as director of the movie Hurricane. About the sentencing, Judge Lawrence J. Rittenband reportedly told Polanski's lawyers that he planned to send Polanski to prison and order his deportation. According to the 2008 documentary Roman Polanski, Wanted and Desired, Deputy District Attorney David Wells showed the judge photos of Polanski at a party in Munich with young girls. This was meant to show that Polanski wasn't taking the charges involving the 13-year-old seriously. However, this was an unusual move since Wells wasn't officially part of the case, but had connections to California. Facing the risk of prison and deportation, Polanski decided to flee the United States. He went to England and became a fugitive from justice. Judge Rittenband said, "On January 30th, Mr. Dalton and Mr. Gunson came to my chambers to discuss Polanski's psychiatric report. I told them that I had carefully read it and that I felt it was superficial, replete with many inaccuracies and factually unsupported conclusions, and was conspicuous more for what it failed to report than what it did report. I believe I used the word whitewash. I stated that there was absolutely no mention in the report of any discussions which the counselors and psychiatrists at Chino had with Mr. Polanski relating to the serious and aggravated charges of drugs and alcohol, sodomy, and oral copulation of the 13-year-old victim. I believe I pointed out to them that a statement in the report that throughout the experience with the victim, Mr. Polanski seems to have been unaware that he was involving himself in a criminal offense, an isolated instance of naivete, unusual in a mature, sophisticated man, was one of the most fatuous statements in a diagnostic report that I have ever read. I told Mr. Dalton that I did not propose to follow the recommendations, which were for straight probation without any additional time in custody. And the saddest part? All those Hollywood execs totally jumped to Roman Polanski's defense back in the day. At the time, most folks didn't really question why his colleagues were so eager to back him up. But with everything we know now about the darker side of Hollywood, it's clear why those big shots were so quick to fall all over themselves to support their buddy. Later, fans found out that the judge had actually planned to hit Polanski with a crazy 50-year sentence for his crimes. But after a little chat with Polanski's lawyer in chambers, the judge suddenly changed his mind. The lawyer spilled the beans to reporters, saying they were ready to slap him with that harsh sentence instead of just going with the time served they had previously negotiated in the plea deal that the judge had agreed to. Feeling like the judge might bail on the plea deal and go for something tougher, Polanski decided to bounce. He told a friend about his escape plan, and just a day before his sentencing, he fled to London and then off to France, where he's been living ever since.
Polanski got caught and he fled the country to avoid persecution. That's what happened. And he's been a fugitive ever since.
Many fans aren't really surprised by the accusations against Spielberg, especially with his ties to Polanski, and that controversial pre-production meeting that led to a 15-year-old female character getting involved with an older guy in the film. It's not exactly a stretch to connect those dots, considering how movies often reflect real life and directors sometimes project their own fantasies onto their projects. Fans think this kind of behavior was probably more common among directors and execs back in the day. Take Thandie Newton's story, for example. She's opened up about her experiences of being objectified on a casting couch, which only adds to this whole vibe.
I found when I was a 16-year-old, fresh from boarding school, going out into, on the casting couch, I was definitely objectified.
Thandie also disclosed that she was manipulated deliberately when she was young and joined the industry. The incident happened when her father went to another country and she was alone. She said, "I was 16 and a virgin. I'd been psychologically G over weeks. I didn't fight him off. I was almost paralyzed with fear. It was SA." During an interview, she recalled another incident which took place when she was auditioning at the studio for the second time. In the meantime, she was asked to be a part of an indecent activity.
I need to sit with my legs apart. The camera was right between, positioned where it could see up my skirt.
Thandie went on to say that during auditions, she was asked to sit in really uncomfortable positions. She recalled, "He asked me to put my leg over the arm of the chair and think about the character I was supposed to be having the dialogue with and how it felt to be made love to by this person. He was a director. I was still very young and thought it must be normal." Years later, when Thandie bumped into that same director at the Cannes Festival, she noticed him giving her a creepy smile that raised her suspicions. Intrigued, she did some digging and was shocked to learn that he had been secretly recording audition tapes and showing them to others in his home. This revelation not only explained his weird behavior toward her, but also shed light on a disturbing practice happening in the industry.
Show that video late at night to interested parties at his house.
Thandie Newton, famous for her roles in Line of Duty and Westworld, has been a strong advocate for raising awareness about the rampant issues of violence and racism in the entertainment industry. Throughout her career, she's bravely opened up about her own experiences and the immense pressure she felt to stay silent about them.
That's been abused. It's not just their role to say enough. It's about the people around. How much are the people that witness, how much are they perpetrators of the crime?
In another interview with British Vogue, Thandie explained how these deeply violent incidents have affected her both psychologically and physically. She said, "There's a moment where the ghost of me changed, and it was 16. He derailed me from myself utterly. I was traumatized. It was a kind of PTSD for sure. I was so distraught and appalled that a director young actress, and that it was happening elsewhere, with minors being abused. It was just messed up. I was basically waiting for someone to come along and say, 'Well, what shall we do about this?'" Thandie said that after she was assaulted, she had problems with eating and used controlling her food as a way to handle the pain. She said, "I punished my body to try and find my heart." It's important to note that while Spielberg was never directly accused of hurting Ariana Richards, actor Crispin Glover, who played George McFly in Back to the Future, did make some serious claims against Spielberg in 2003. In his book and film called What Is It?, Glover suggested that Spielberg had a worrying interest in showing young boys in uncomfortable or inappropriate situations, which might show something about Spielberg himself. Fans have guessed that directors sometimes hide their own fantasies in their movies. Some think this might be true for Spielberg's 1985 movie. These talks often show how movies can mix fiction and reality in tricky ways. In one scene, a boy seems to be putting back the broken penis of a statue, and his face looks like it means something more. Many fans have asked why it was the statue's penis broken out of everything else. They wondered why kids were shown in scenes like this when there are many other ways to make people laugh. This is part of why Crispin Glover didn't like how Spielberg seemed focused on showing boys in these strange and questionable situations. There's even a clip where one of the boys has the statue's mouth after it broke off, which makes the scene even more controversial. It usually takes a long time for victims to find the courage to speak up about what happened to them. By then, the people who hurt them might be older and less powerful, but the damage is already done. That's why stars like Ariana Grande and Jennifer Lawrence speak out for better protection for people working in Hollywood. Jennifer Lawrence says that if we can keep animals safe on movie sets, we should make sure humans are safe too, especially in places that can be harmful. She thinks it's important to stop these things from happening in the first place, instead of waiting and hoping they don't happen again later.
I mean, there's protections for animals, in filming. I think there need to be protections legally put in place to protect people when they're filming, human beings.
It's way too common for victims to feel guilty about what happened to them. And when they face public backlash, it just makes things worse. This is especially true when the person who hurt them is rich or famous. Sometimes these perpetrators twist the story to make it seem like the victims are just trying to cash in, which totally messes with how people see the situation. Unfortunately, a lot of folks buy into that narrative and jump to defend the offender, completely ignoring or discrediting what the victim has gone through. So far, Spielberg hasn't faced any lawsuits over his alleged crimes. People in Hollywood are definitely talking about it, but no one seems brave enough to take him to court. He's on Epstein's list, and with everything that's come to light, it feels like someone is bound to come forward soon. That's it for today. See you in the next video. Until then, goodbye.